Brillhart. I'm the founder of a company called Vrai Pictures. I have a platform here at South by Southwest that had its premiere called Travers, which is a spatial audio platform that lets listeners physically move through audio. And we had 3 pieces here. 2 are from an album called From Elvis in Memphis. So they're Elvis Presley experiences, multi-track legacy recording of Elvis Presley in the studio, where you can walk around and move towards different session musicians or away from them, towards Elvis, away from him, and so on. So it felt like you were in the presence of him, which was pretty rad and kind of weird in a good way. And we also had an experience called The Arm of Insight, which is on the other end of the spectrum, I think, which is more game design, educational, repurposes publicly available assets from the Insight lander, what it was able to capture on Mars, including audio, which is its most recent victory, and images as well of the Mars landscape and so on. So, and a selfie, but that's if you win. And then I also did the Convergence keynote as well. So yeah, this year at South by it was a big South by Southwest for myself and Vrai Pictures. Also for the development team, creative development team, Super Bright, which played a huge role in the success of what we're able to achieve here. Igal Nasima is generally my tech director for these things. So between him and me, it's been a journey just to get the platform ready to go and to introduce it to the world. And the response was incredible, and people totally got it. And there's so many places and ways to explore what we can do with spatial audio as a platform, and especially the way that we can push Traverse in cool, awesome directions. So we're excited to get back to work on that. And the Convergence keynote, I think, went okay. I wore a cape eventually, and then I sang, which is just weird, but I guess I did that. And yeah, when we did the keynote, by we I mean me, when I did the keynote, I structured it in such a way that it would be a kind of a bit of a syllabus for people to take and use for whatever they'd like in terms of having that be a resource for making better immersive content. So I feel like the keynote itself was also another big project to kind of pull out of myself. So it was that and Traverse and announcing some projects, and yeah, anyway, it was a big festival. It was a big year. Immersive for me is just generally the goal of what these pieces of technology are aiming for. I mean, I think occasionally I hear different other terms used, and something like spatial computing from a technical standpoint, which I also think is close. It's weird because I think anytime that everything can be immersive potentially. If you feel as if you're a part of something, is that immersive? I don't know. I think when I think about immersive, it's simply the act of really understanding what it means to have someone in a different reality, or it's either enhancing our biological capacity to experience the world, and that may also be something that challenges our notions of reality, which I think is what VR is particularly good at doing. I think AR's real potential is in the enhancement and the extending of our abilities, biologically speaking. So I think those 2 technologies generally are speaking more to like, how do we become more than ourselves, and how can we surpass the constraints that we have in what we call the physical real world. What that means is elusive, and I don't think we really know what that is yet, so I can't really say what it is, but I think that it's a means of extending us beyond ourselves and the constraints that we're under by existing in the world. Last year at South by Southwest, I had some really great help from just a little company called Bose. And I met this really great guy, Matt Neutra, who was a big fan of my work and was really excited about talking to me more about what they were doing at Bose with AR. And to be honest, you know, I get a lot of companies saying, oh, we're in like AR, VR, and whatever, and I tend to be a little bit more skeptical than positive about it because, you know, there's just so much stuff in the space and some of it isn't great. Actually, a lot of it isn't great. So it wasn't like I didn't have faith in Bose. I absolutely did, but I just was a bit like, well, we'll see. And I went with my skeptical hat on, and I left extremely blown away by the potential of it. I've always been a huge proponent for spatial audio. All of my pieces have spatial audio in them, except for the Weather Channel piece, which has Kenny G, which you don't really need to be spatialized, but maybe someday in the future I can make it, and Kenny G will let me spatialize his music within the space. But for the most part, yeah, I really believe in how spatial audio can be the glue that binds us into believing we're somewhere else. And without it, we really are just looking at a screen again. So going into the Bose AR house last year at South by Southwest, hearing the potential of it, and then getting asked, well, if you could do something with this, what would you do? And I met the group in Framingham and talked to the engineers, and the first thing I thought of was, well, wouldn't it be great if you could take a song and then kind of bring out the components of it and spatialize that and be able to walk around in it. And I had been working with the Elvis folks for a little bit, and I thought, you know, well, what if it was an Elvis track? You know, what if I could actually move towards Elvis? Wouldn't that be interesting? And I sort of was explaining this, and I look around the room, and everyone's eyes were like, that would be amazing. And I was like, yeah, I think people would actually want that too. And I went back and kind of thought about it for a little bit. And what I came to the conclusion I came to was, if I do this once, I could do it 1,000 times over. Like, music and any audio has been delivered in, you know, a small file, in a lot of ways compressed now in order to stream it to as many people as possible. And that's how we've known audio to be, is in this kind of simple format. And if you look behind the curtain of that, it's substantially far more dynamic, far more rich than we've known it to be. And I've been in so many situations with audio folks who've created these really great mixes, designed super well, high fidelity, multi-track, awesome, and then they've had to just compress the heck out of it. And it's or tested on like really crappy computer speakers or phone speakers, and it's kind of a sad reality for them, which is like, yeah, but we're used to it, you know, we're taking this thing that we spend so much time on and care so much about. And in my experience with VR, you know, thinking about how the way that we see film and how limiting in a way that was, and how that was preventing us from really understanding the full expanse of the experiences that we were creating, I realized that audio had the same issues, really, where they had this little thing that behind it was an expansive world of information and sounds, and it was far more complex and far more rich than we've known it to be, just by the nature of the delivery and technology that we have. But now we're at a stage where we actually have the technology and the capacity to really celebrate how amazingly enriching audio is, and the dimensionality of audio. And to explore what that means, and then to suddenly think about, you know, how does my movement through that sound space change the way that I can connect to this audio, change my perspective of a particular song. Can I connect to music or a podcast or to a field recording in a way that I haven't been able to before, by virtue of being able to have that agency to move around in a space and move around within that particular space. So my brain started going down this rabbit hole of like, there's so many implications to this, and it's such a simple idea that if I'm going to do this once, I want to do it 1,000,000 times. I want others to do it too. So I might as well build a platform, which is a weird thing to think about. You know, I've been working for technology companies for a long time. I've been working within the confines of certain technology given to me for a while. And I've always tried to come up with like what's going to help this technology thrive. And it was the idea of building a platform and having my own tech suddenly and building out my own idea for what technology could be and should be felt like the right thing to do. And I felt like it was the right thing to make at the right time, and we were in the right moment, and then Travers occurred. And it's great because, it's a kind of crazy idea, and then I went to Igal Nasima over at Superbright and said, well, I want to build this audio platform, this spatial audio platform, what do you think? And he's like, let's do it. Let's just give it a shot. And so both of us went on this journey trying to figure out, looking at how people actually use audio systems now, not trying to create anything that's too completely overbearing. So it's low barrier for entry. We're trying to be as human with it as possible. Really thinking about end user, but mostly thinking about people who just want to do this at home. So Travers was built for the at-home market. Mostly because there's so many people out there in the world that have not done anything remotely immersive because the barrier for entry is way too high. Headsets of all sorts, AR, VR, or otherwise, are way too expensive. They change all the time. They're weird looking. I mean, I don't think they're weird looking, but I've been around them for a while now, but they're weird looking for people. And it's amazing when you can hold up a pair of headphones and say that and your phone, and that's all you need to have really powerful immersive experiences. And suddenly spatial audio became such the real, it solved all these hurdles or these problems and answered all these questions that VR has had for a while now. And myself as a creator, the kind of issues I was having with it, which was the fact that, again, getting this to as many people as possible is really difficult. It is high barrier for entry. Making content for it is actually really difficult, and it's hard. And suddenly, there's tons of spatial audio content out there because all music was essentially that. It just wasn't realized like that at the time because that wasn't the delivery format. So you have legacy recordings, Elvis's recording was from 1969, and that's and ever since then, if not before then too, you've had these multi-track recordings created. Thinking about how people at home can suddenly have their entire record collection be something that is literally traversable. You can spatialize it and walk through it, and walk up to to different band members. You can play in that orchestra. You can sing in that band. The implications are vast, and everyone gets it. It's not a hard thing to understand, and it shows the potential of immersive and where it can go, and it does make you feel like a rock star, and it does make you feel like you matter, and it's delivered to you in a small. The file sizes are negligible compared to most VR experiences. So anyway, there's tons of reasons why spatial audio is just the amazing gateway to what immersive could do. We also have a visual on the phone that is meant to be a very simple aura visual that is a map, essentially. So when you think about what an album cover could be in this space, since it is a spatial thing, it seems like the evolution of that should be the map. So thinking about a way to visualize what a map could be, what the default could be. The Arm of Insight experience actually has the landscape of Mars as the map instead. So how can we modify that? How can we change that depending on the experience if it needs that, right? So it's all these different components that make it so interesting and fascinating for me. And there's so much potential for it. But even in its very simple form, like an Elvis Presley track from 1969 that you can move through, even in that in itself is powerful. So if that's powerful and it's very simplistic form, it works and it's powerful and people get it, then there's just all sorts of stuff you can do with it. And it's and then everybody can suddenly do it. And it's accessible and it just feels right to do. And what's great is that once you get people really excited about the potential through something like spatial audio, then you get people being like, well, what else is there? Is there a way that I can be in a different, like on a different world? Is there a visual thing I can do? Can I start to interact with things? And then you might get people who actually buy more headsets as a result. You know, it's not even like they will get so fascinated by the potentials of something like a spatial experience that they may actually be interested in the thing that we've been wanting them to understand and be interested in from the beginning. So it feels like that's the way forward. Feels right. So when I talk about dimensionality in audio, especially music, Elvis, one of the reasons, there are many reasons why Elvis is perfect for the first kind of experience on Travers. He worked with some amazing session musicians, like really great craftswomen and men. And you know, when you listen to an Elvis track, you don't necessarily listen to the track for the harmonica player, even though that player has totally made that Elvis track awesome. You kind of listen to it because it's Elvis, or you like the song. You don't really, it's rare that the session artists get celebrated beyond like the real nerds who like go through and say, oh, you know, you did this, that, or the other thing. My first biography that I ever read of Elvis Presley was actually written by Scotty Moore, which was his guitarist, who is awesome. And like any guitarist that's worked since Elvis has you know, celebrated Scotty because he was a really good guitarist, and he was part of like the Elvis Presley posse, but he was kind of a bit to the side when Elvis started taking off. He kind of helped, he was there for a little bit, and then he kind of dropped off to do his own thing. But anyway, his perspective is what has always been really important to me, because hearing what he had to say about Elvis, and then also thinking about like how he came to terms with what he was trying to do as a session guitarist essentially was big, and he was very much a part of why Elvis became as famous as he did. He believed in him and he supported him, and he was very talented as well. When I speak to the dimensionality of music or audio or anything, you know, there's so many components, and with music it's no different. The session artists are amazing and are just as crucial as the lead singer, and Elvis worked with some just amazing session artists, just fantastic. One of the things that we really enjoyed doing was, you know, when we reached out to like Sony Legacy and we said, hey, we're going to do this Elvis thing, and they gave us the multi-track of Suspicious Minds and Power of My Love. We were for the first time able to actually listen to the individual artists that were there with Elvis recording for those tracks. And, you know, some of them got looped together, like it'd be like guitarist and piano, and then you'd get like, you know, the bass and the drums and the horns. But they all were people. And we were able to look up, you know, who these people were. And so on the Travers platform, you don't see, you know, harmonica when you get an additional, actually when you press and hold on the screen on that map that I described, when you press and hold on the screen of the phone, an additional contextual layer comes up that gives you more information about what those sounds represent. And each of those sounds that you see in each of the Elvis tracks are people's names. Unless it's like trumpets or strings, because then there's like a lot of names, so we just kind of, we had to group them together. But my favorite musician other than Elvis on those two tracks, well, specifically Power of My Love, is the harmonica player, Ed. And I actually always stand next to Ed and just listen to Ed, because Ed is just going at it. He's just like wailing, and he's just really giving it his all, and it's insanely impressive. In the beginning of each of the experiences, we actually use another session player to help orient you. So you actually have to walk towards Reggie or walk towards Ed in order to start the experience. So it brings respect to the fact that there are other people here that are contributing to this. So don't, be excited about Elvis, but also explore, because there's some other amazing musicians here who could give you another perspective on that track that perhaps you hadn't had before, or couldn't have before. So I think that's really important, like there's so much, again, that goes into creating this stuff, and we've only been able to really celebrate a very small sliver of it, where it all represents really great direction and artistic intent on Elvis's part, his producer's part, and the sound engineer's part. But it also shows that, you can't do it alone. And it makes you think about all the films that you see and, how we celebrate the director, but behind every great director is an amazing team of artists and people who struggle very hard to bring this kind of film to life. And the idea that you can actually celebrate various components of a frame, things that went into a frame or things that went into a music track, that's a really big part. It's a big potential for the immersive space, is to be able to explore and celebrate those components and those people. So this is no different. What we're very open to at this point with Travers. I'm not a musician at all. I've played piano and stopped when I realized I would never be Elton John. I started guitar, realized I would never be Stevie Ray Vaughan, so I stopped that too. I think at a certain point you're like, this is a fun thing to do, and I love music, and I'll find a way to make a difference there. But I don't think contributing my musical skills is not. That musical skills are not one of them. But I felt that I really do respect. I grew up listening to music, a lot of rock and roll artists, Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, Allman Brothers Band, Led Zeppelin, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Little Wing. I can go on. I grew up listening to musicians who, rock and roll bands and other musicians, Peter Gabriel, who really. They didn't do traditional music. I mean, they actually really saw music creation as a way of exploring audio and sound, and they brought in different, elements. There's a John Lee Hooker song that's actually panned in such a way that if you're listening closely, you can actually hear that he's singing into one ear, and it's creepy, but that's the point of the song. So we actually do that with Power of My Love. When you do that experience on Travers, Elvis appears kind of here, and it kind of feels like he's telling you, hey, you can't get away from me. I'm right behind you, which is amazing. And then his harmony comes this way. So I think there's a lot of really interesting ways to explore, kind of how we bring people into this, and how we can kind of create really awesome different mixes of instruments and sounds in a way that was also done very early on, but just now that we have all this other space to work with, and they can actually do this and people can actually hear it the right way. That said, I think there's a lot of different ways we can go with it. There's a lot of room for improvement. I think that as we bring in more audio experts and artists into the fold, we'll start to get a sense of how can we be better? How can this platform really embrace what you would like it to embrace, as people who've been working in the space for some time. There are certainly still restraints on, both the technology side and just from an audio perspective, what can we do? How realistic is it? How true to form should it be given what it is? I think also, some things are just really difficult, things like reverb, which we kind of take for granted, is mathematically incredibly challenging stuff. And it could be that in the age of intelligent systems, we can actually apply that to reverb and actually come up with ways of extrapolating what reverb could be. So if Elvis is in your living room, it actually sounds like he's in your living room, as opposed to sounding like where he was in 1969, which in itself is also not really the studio, it's a sound booth, so it's it has a particular resonance in the way that it's recorded and so on. So it's just difficult to make anything really truly accurate, right? So I feel like that is going to be something that improves over time, and we're excited about that. Another thing that I think is just inherent in the technology right now, and for our first iteration, we couldn't dive deeply into it, but it is front of mind, is accessibility. When it comes to audio-only experiences where you are moving through it, red flags for me are, as excited as I am about this, and obviously I'm very passionate about it, is, well, how about people who can't move, and how about people who can't hear, maybe people who can't see? How does that from the ground up, how does that change what Travers actually is? And are there ways that we can implement other technologies within Travers that will help not only bring those people into the experience and not leave them behind, but also how does that also inform how we develop the platform versus like an afterthought? You actually want that to be baked into the platform at the very beginning, or close to the beginning, as it were. So, and it's hard because you're thinking audio, you know, if you're deaf, is audio something, an audio experience, something that would be even remotely interesting to them? And I would say yes. My experience with making something like Beethoven's Fifth, you know, you learn that even for an experience that is literally called the name of a song, we had people who were deaf coming through because we actually had told, you know, publicly that we were thinking about haptic responses and thinking about how Beethoven was going deaf at the time, and thinking about Helen Keller and her experience of putting her hand against a radio during Beethoven's Ninth, and how she was connected very much with audio and with Beethoven once she did that. So I think there is vast potential for having accessibility tools introduced. Because I think that's just it's not because we have to. I think it's not like I don't feel like it's I don't feel obligated. It feels like it makes sense to do that. I feel like our platform will only get better if we think about that first and bake this stuff in first. And I think that the way that the people who are deaf or blind or mobility impaired experience the world is also part of the everyone, the everyone tank. We want to make sure that our platform is completely inclusive. We believe that platforms, or I very much believe that platforms should be developed with accessibility in mind from the very beginning, and Travers will certainly be built in that, with that in mind. The next steps for Travers are to think very much about accessibility, about those who are hearing impaired, visually impaired, mobility impaired. So we're working on that stuff, working with experts in the field. So if you happen to be an expert in the field, help, shout. Well, we would love to talk to you. Thinking about social, thinking about live events. We're working with all sorts of artists and institutions who have told us that this platform is something that can either help them do something that's been very difficult for them, or it simply evolves what they've been trying to do. Working with more musicians, working with podcasters. We are also thinking very much about, physical installations as well. How do we create location-based work? What does it mean to move through spaces while also using something like Travers? So for the Tribeca Film Festival this year, we have a piece with Yo-Yo Ma on Travers called Into the Light, which maps Bach's Cello Suite number 2 in D minor to Spring Studios in New York. So you actually start from the 6th floor of Spring Studios and you move towards the roof, and you essentially move through the movements of Bach. And Bach was very mathematical. Classical music and music in general is math. I mean, it's really astounding when you look at it. So working with Yo-Yo has been a delight because he's played this so much, and he understands the physicality, the potential physicality of something like this. So, and Into Light, it's actually something that he himself has called the Cello Suite number 2 because he feels feels like you're going from somewhere dark and damp to somewhere open and bright, which is why we walk towards the roof. And that is going to speak more to like, how can our movements elicit certain emotional responses? How can that reveal parts of the music? Can there be parts of the music that throw you off, and do you go or do you stay? Is Yo-Yo accessible, or is he out there in the world in a place where you can't actually get to him? How does that affect you emotionally? So we're experimenting a lot with that. And we're thinking a lot more about a number of additional features and ways to expand the platform. But eventually where we want this to go is it becomes a platform that that you can use and that you can create stuff on, and that is not just a place for you to find really great spatial audio experiences. It will be if it was my pie in the sky, but I think honestly anything's possible if you have Elvis on your platform. I think it's totally. But we would love it to be the destination for all music that is spatial. We would want it to be the place for all podcasts that want to be spatial. We want it to be a place where, artists who are just dabbling in it for the first time want to be able to experiment and explore games, education, science. But we also want it to be a place where once you have really become super inspired by the potentials of it, you're able to take your creations and have it there too for other people to explore as well. So we want to be a hub and a place to celebrate and celebrate it in an elegantly designed, simple way, so that it is as accessible as it can be by people from anywhere in the world on any, using any headset, AR, audio, or otherwise, right? That said, we're in early stages, so we do have Travers on the App Store. It is available for anyone who has Bose frames or QC35s that were, I think, made after November, so you have to check and see if it's AR ready, which you can do using the Bose Connect app. And it's available for iOS in the US, but it will be available to other territories and other platforms very soon. So watch this. No, hear this space, I guess, for more.